this thing on? I think it is. You know, I forgot to make another screen. So nope, can't use that screen because it doesn't have my voice on it, so can't use that. All right, hey everybody, my name is Derek and I am screwing everything up tonight. But beyond that, I'm the owner, creator, and head silicone slinger at Amavidi, where we make silicone toys for adults. All right, so we've got a collector on this week. You might have noticed last week we also had another collector on. That was Dong Sommelier. And that was a really interesting conversation. So go back and check that one out if you like it. And you want to hear what it's like from the other side of the screen, what it's like being a collector. And tonight, Ishtar 137 is going to be able to give us another perspective from that side of the screen as well. But before we do that, I want to remind everybody we've got a Patreon. And if you want to, you can support us that way. It's patreon.com/Amavidi. George will throw a link into the chat here in just a moment. We've got some interesting guests coming up here in the next few weeks as well. We've got Kristen from Pleasure Forge, who's going to be here next weekend. The weekend after that, on September 4th, we've got Bat, who is a toy designer, as well as Venus, who is also a designer. Venus is going to be on September 11th, and then on the 18th, we've got Monster Fergus, and that'll be a really interesting conversation. I will have more details for folks as we get closer, but yeah, we've got some good people lined up. I'm really looking forward to all these different conversations and hearing from folks and just their different perspectives on the indie toy industry. All right, well, with that, I'm going to bring Ishtar 137 on. Ishtar, how you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
I am well, thank you. I mean, it's been actually kind of nice around here today. We got a little storm front that came through and kept it nice. So yeah, I've been kind of enjoying that. We got the patio door open and letting the
That's
air
a nice
go.
relief.
Right. So why don't you take just a moment and introduce yourself, give people kind of a little rundown about you and what got you into this little world.
Sure thing. Hey, everybody. I'm Ishtar, also known as Isht_17 on Reddit. And part of what got me into this was right at the shutdown at the pandemic in March of 2020, my trusty vibrator from 2007 that I got at a passion party decided to die on me. And so as I was looking through and researching new vibrators and new, sex toys, I remembered an article that a friend of mine had shared from 2018 from Cosmopolitan magazine, of all places.
Cosmo.
And they had, I know, it's so wild. And they had a couple pictures of Bad Dragon toys, and as well as like geeky sex toys and a whole bunch of other indie stuff, which I had no idea these things existed. And so I just started researching and going down the rabbit hole and started learning more and more about this whole other world. I had, I'm in my 50s, and so for me, I've always, yeah, absolutely. And then, so I had always kind of been interested in sex positive, but like I, finally cleaned out and threw away like my teeny little bullet vibrator from 1992. And so, it was time for an overhaul. And as I learned more and more about silicone and I really started appreciating the artwork side of it, that this was functional art. And then I started watching videos. Lily O'Reilly was a big one. Tawny Sarin was another. And, and then I was reading just, since I was buying a brand new vibrator, I was also, doing Super Smash Cash and Foul File reviews and Epiphora, of course. And it was just like, wow, all this stuff out there. And I just kind of went, dove right in. And then who else? After the Yes was another big one. So I was reading their blog and their reviews, and I saw some of the big collections like Kitty Lord Saviors through them, and then I had always kind of poo-pooed Reddit, and then that was what got me onto Reddit. And then once I got into Reddit, it was just like a spiral. Excuse me for just a second. I have to let the cat out. He snuck in. So hold on just a second.
While you're doing that, I'm going to just let everybody know, as we're talking, I'm going to be throwing up pictures, and we're going to be sharing some photos from Ishtar's collection, which you can see part of it behind you now. Oh, there you go. And let me go ahead and pull one up, because I think were these your first purchases?
Those were my first purchases. So I actually bought like a set of firmness pucks and some teenies, because I didn't know how drops worked. I had, just no idea. This was before I joined Reddit. And so I was just like, I was going on the website. I'm like, why can't I buy this mini Orochi? And it was like a weekend that they had what they called ghost inventory, where it would show up, but like no one could buy it.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think as I was reading, and then I finally like caught it, because I had no idea how drops worked. I had no idea like what time they dropped. That you could get something other than the basic colorations or solid colors. I had no idea that there was this whole other menu to order from, basically, or that they or what rogues were. I had to learn a lot of that stuff on my own.
Yeah.
So
now, one thing you went from a vibrator to dildos, and dildos generally don't have vibration.
No, I actually did have a dildo. It was a Doc Johnson, and it was hard as a rock. Cool. And like the 2 times I used it, I got a yeast infection afterwards.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, there are there's so many better options than Doc Johnson.
Yes,
but
luckily I did have one, and I have it with me. And I had bought in the early aughts in Boston. There was a fantastic sex toy store called Grand Opening in Brookline. And it was owned by Kim Ayers, and she's still very active on Twitter. She still does toy reviews. And while I was there, I got this, and it's a glass G-spotter dildo. So I knew that there were other better options, and this
Glass has fascinated me, and in the back of my head, I keep thinking that maybe one day I'll start experimenting with glass. But it's so beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. And this one was like one of the, you get in there and you're like, wow, I love that one and that one and that one. Mm-hmm. Kind of like how I am with all of these. It's like, I want that. I feel like Madeline Kahn in like History of the World. Yes. No, yes, no.
You made some very brave choices there.
Yes.
Which is another line from History of the World Part 1.
Yes.
Oh boy, we're showing off our movie history.
Our pop knowledge, yes.
Now here we've got another picture, which is a little bit later.
Yes, but not by much.
Because I think the first one was in May, and this is in June.
Close. So the first one was in April, and this one would have been in May. Okay. So you can see the first 4, which is Orochi, Sleipnir, the little squirt, and the Uberime sleeve. And by then I had discovered Pleasure Forge, and Twin Tail Creations, and that's it for there. Because I think Kudu Voodoo was on break at that point. They were in the middle of designing their website, and I hadn't quite got Strange Bedfellas yet.
And I can see that you were still struggling with lint.
It's, you know what, that never ends. That you have a cat, it's like The other night I had a brand new toy and I held it up to the light and I watched a piece of cat hair jumped onto the toy from the light.
So a little bit of technical is that silicone has a natural negative charge to it. And so it does have a tendency to draw dust, cat hair, lint, everything to it. It naturally has a negative charge. And so, yeah, the struggle is real. And for those of us who are trying to sell them and make them look perfect, then it's a never-ending battle.
I hear lint rollers are the way to go. After a while, I'll do that. Sometimes if I'm really frustrated, I'll do the trick. I'll just get some Scotch tape and I'll just kind of do it in a roll and just kind of...
Yeah. Now, this one, I think, is your next collection pick.
Yes, and these are mostly indies. So this would have been June or July. So there's still some of the friends that were in the previous picture, but now I've discovered Strange Bedfellas. I got a Rogue from the drop, from the convention drop, which was a whole other thing. That like learning curve is like the crazy drops, like from, and that was I think like mid-April. It was like Easter weekend maybe of 2020, and I would go and try and buy something and it would be like gone instantly. And like learning that and being so frustrated, like I can see it, wait, and just that slow like internet, like not being wired, being on my phone, and it was just like, oh wow. But that's just how it goes. And then I think as you slowly learn to, as you collect and you kind of figure out what your aesthetic is or not, then you realize that all these creators are constantly making just beautiful. There's always something new. There's always going to be something different.
Yeah.
So like now I don't get quite as heartbroken if I don't get a toy that I had fallen in love with, because I know that they're going to make something awesome down the line, or that there are, certain pores that they're fantastic at, that they're they have their own color palettes.
Right. Now you went from about 4 pieces in, I guess it was March or April, and now you're up to around 20 or so in the course of just a few months. I guess you got bit by the bug.
Oh, completely. But you noticed a lot of those are minis and smalls. So, and they generally cost less than as well as flops. Right. So if you're a new collector, like, or even an older collector, you have to kind of make your budget stretch. Then you look at flops, you look at Rogue, like Rogue pores, ones that are just slightly different, like that Mystic in the back is a Con Nat 20 Rogue. So it's not named. So like if that had been a named pour, it would have been probably $20-$30 more expensive. But because it's a Rogue, it's an off pour, then, there's something slightly different about it. Maybe it doesn't have the right proportions, or things aren't colored in the places that they're supposed to be. Then it's labeled as a Rogue. So it's not quite, it doesn't get that stamp of a total stamp of approval, and it doesn't have that extra upcharge for colors.
Gotcha. I think that's something that we have to learn as we're coming into this, is what do those terms mean? Drops, we've talked about that a little bit. And, basically a maker will have a certain number of pieces and then they will drop it on the website at a particular time. And then there's a mad rush to get to all of it. Yes. Rogues, as you talked about, they're colorways that just weren't quite right. And then there's also the size and firmness. Medium. And you'll have to correct me. One of those is the size, and the other one is the firmness.
Correct. Usually, it's the size is first, and the firmness is second. So if something is a small soft, it's a small size and a soft firmness. And you really have to go into each maker's, like there's a general acceptance of what firmnesses are, which shores, and you might be able to speak to this a little bit better than I can, but like so a 30 or an 0030 is a soft, and then a 4 or a 5 is a medium, and different, and you have to read the FAQs, because they'll tell you like, oh, this is what we call a medium, And then, so that's usually a 5 and then a 7 and then an 07 or is a firmness. And then you get up to like a 10A, and then that's like really firm.
Yeah, that's one of the problems is that we talk about soft, medium, and firm, and those are kind of descriptors, but they're not really definitive. And one of the problems in getting definitive is that a 0050 in a large is going to feel very different than a 0050 in a small. Yeah,
absolutely.
The volume of the silicone makes a big difference into what it feels like. So, we can try to, it's kind of a moving target, trying to figure out how to talk about it.
And then you get, into the near clear, and then that's a whole, which is a new, type of silicone that makers are using. And then the firmness, like it's going to feel really different. Like it almost has its own notation, right? It's like N clear 31 or like soft plus or medium plus. And again, you're looking at the size and the shape of the toy, because if it has like a like a point on it, it's going to be very different, up at the top, up here than it is down here.
And it's a really good way of being able to tell that difference is, that thinner area at the tip is going to feel a lot softer than that thicker shaft.
Yeah, right.
So when it comes to drops,
just for reference points, this is a Pleasure Forge lava method in Vampire's Library, and this is a near clear medium, and I think the size is a large. And then this is also a Pleasure Forge. Here's my camera. Pleasure Forge Illithid in a medium, near clear, 45 medium in the dancing lights. There's actually a hole in the bottom of this one that you can put a light in that will flash, and that's super fun.
Gotcha. When it comes to drops, how do you feel about them from the buyer's perspective?
From the buyer's perspective, oh boy. So, it seems like there are so many more collectors now. And so, different shops have different ways of handling it. Some will announce their drops like, weeks in advance, and they'll do previews, which is actually really good, because then you can plan ahead of like, what are the things I'm really going to go for? And then, there are others that will just like drop anywhere from 300, and by drop, it's like a release into inventory, anywhere between 300 and to 2,000, depending on the maker. Or even they could be 20. You don't know, because, if you have a really small indie maker, they're only going to do, a certain amount, whereas you have a big company like Bad Dragon, they're going, that could be, and they're releasing like a new model, or they're doing sort of special colors, or they're getting ready for a convention, and then they'll do like thousands. So that's crazy. But then there are other shops that will do what's called a pre-shop. So ahead of when they're going to have their scheduled drop at like, say, 8 o'clock at night, they'll have a pre-shop that opens up at 6. So you can kind of see what they have. So again, you can plan ahead and kind of see what you might want to do. Some shops are experimenting with stealth drops, right? Where they'll just release some things unannounced. For people who maybe have slow internet, or who are on the other side of the world. Who are collectors, and so that they, instead of being everyone rushing, like, the bridal sale at Filing's basement, rushing to the doors, then they'll, they can kind of be like, oh, I just happened to pop in and I found this thing I was looking for and the colors I wanted. Like, I'm so psyched.
Now, go ahead. Do you feel like your collection is an investment?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Like I think I upped my homeowner's insurance to accommodate for it.
Okay.
And I definitely have like a bin of like the things I'm going to grab in case of an emergency. like, I'm sure grab my laptops and my silicone
Yeah.
and the photo albums.
So I've got
but-
another one here.
Yes.
And this is a little bit later, I think.
It is.
Your collection has grown somewhat.
Yes. And I think this was building. So I'm going to guess that this is February of 2021. And
So about 10 to 12 months after you started.
Yeah. Right. And I think because Black Friday is another, like, there are certain things that I've learned that are like really prime times for like when makers go all out. Black Friday and like the holidays are one of them. June for Pride Month is another. Usually like springtime, the beginning of springtime is another really big time when, and Halloween.
Right.
Like those are like the really big events. And so this was after Black Friday. And so I work 2 jobs. So I have a little, and I'm older and I'm married, and, so I have a little bit of extra income. We weren't eating out a lot because it was the pandemic. So I had some extra money to spend. So, I do and I like to sample, right? So I'll get like something from this maker and something from that maker. And I've never heard of them. I want to try them out. I'll get like a mini or a squishy and see what they're like. And, just kind of, it's like tapas, right? You just try lots of different small plates. And then after a while, you figure out that, like, yes, I really do want a large merfolk in Vampire's Library, which is one of my all-time favorite pours. So,
do you have a particular theme or style that you're trying to develop?
No. I have a couple micro collections, I guess. Like, I really love pink.
Okay.
And pink and purple, they're my favorite colors. And so that and blue. So I'll have a lot of like gem and jewel tones. But then, like, I wanted a bunch of dessert pours. So, like, there's some carrot cake and some unicorn cake, and those are 2 of Bad Dragon's better-known pours.
Okay.
And then, gemstone pours, like opals and alexandrite. And but, like, sometimes some of my choices really surprise me, and my brain just goes, brr, that's so pretty. Space, I have some black and I have some dark. Really dark pours that I also love. So it's kind of all over the place. Okay.
Yeah, I keep going through and I keep showing pictures because we've got so many of them, and I've got tons and tons more pictures. We've got tons and tons more pictures. So just keep watching, folks. If you see something that you like, yell in the chat, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about it specifically.
Sure.
But
so there that has some eggs. So like what I've done since then is I've pulled out like the eggs and the squishies, and they have their own display. And those are the ones that I tend to leave out a little bit because they are squishies. I do have kids, so they are, I have to be sensitive about what I leave out, right? Like, this is not staying like this.
Right.
This is all coming down after the interview. But I'll have some things like the Aerith, the Kudu Voodoo Aerith head. She stays out. She's glow in the dark. And the Wendy heads, these are from Strange Bedfellas. Those will stay out because they're cute. And they don't look particularly phallic. So
okay, so you've got a few that you keep out on display, but in general, we'll get to this in a little bit. But in general, they all kind of go into storage, and we've got some pictures of how you store things, and we'll come back around to that.
Yeah, that's a big question that everybody has. Especially, like, I know some collectors leave their stuff out like all the time, but I just can't do that.
Yeah. All right, let me see. I want to make sure I get... There's another one. And I think this group of pictures is all from right around the same time.
Yeah, so this is like a collection. So, like, it's a struggle. The struggle is real as far as putting together these collection pictures, right?
Yeah.
Some people will do like it's called a dong circle, and they'll just put them, or like the dongscapes that like Dong Som made that are fabulous. And so like when you have, like, you can see my feet in that picture you just showed, because I was standing up on a stool on the bed, like with my hands like up as high as I could get them to like get the picture. And like, so I had to take like 3 or 4 of them to like get everything to fit. And so, you know, like we'll have these, and you'll probably show the hallway pictures at some point. Because that's how much my collection grew, is I couldn't fit everything on the bed anymore.
Yeah, I'll have to see if I can find that one.
We'll get to it.
Yeah, we'll get to
I'm
it.
Sure. But yeah, so after a while, I started just kind of making like monthly, like here's what arrived this month. And I started doing like monthly collection shots, because it was just much easier to manage. There it is. There's the hallway.
So how do you feel about flops?
I have a lot of flops, and it depends on like the pour. Like sometimes the pour is just so desirable that like it could have a chunk out of it and I'd be fine. And then like, whereas others, I'm like, oh, this is a really good one. It has like just a little divot in what should have been a suction cup or a failed suction cup. And it'll be, or a teeny tiny beauty mark, and it'll be marked down for that. I'll be like, oh, and it's, you know, like 5-10% off. You know, a toy, like a small toy is through Bad Dragon is $85, but a flop is $68.
Yeah.
And so last July they had a decent sized price increase. And they increased it for their fades and for their marbles. And so like now those are the ones I'm trying to hold on to, because I paid so much less for them than what they cost now.
Yeah, the increase in the price of silicone is something that a lot of us makers are dealing with. And, you know, depending on how they've done their pricing and the way that they've structured their business, sometimes that means they've had to increase their prices, and sometimes it means that they've had to discount some inventory in order to get the cash flow moving and that kind of stuff. So it's I just saw a quick comment that said wide trim, my beloved, and yes, mine too. Okay. Yeah. So when, you know, so this is a Bad Dragon Ika, and this is a flop, and so you can see where it was trimmed wide around the base. Again, like I fell in love with this color. I saw it and I was like, I need it. And of course, you know, there are some models I did. The trimming of the base doesn't really have any impact on its usability or how it looks on the shelf or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, let me see. Let me go back and check and see if George has dropped any questions in here that I need to get back to.
Yeah.
Now, let's see. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go next, because we've got some glow in the dark ones here.
Yeah, those are actually UV.
UV, yeah.
Yeah. So UV, ultraviolet, you would get like a bar light or a special flashlight like this one. And then when you shine it, you can see that the colors just really, really pop.
Yeah.
And then some of them will glow in the dark afterwards. So instead of putting it in the window to charge up, you use a UV flashlight, and then it will really make those colors pop.
Yeah. And those are a nightmare to photograph.
Yes. All the makers have my sympathy to try and get those, because it's so hard. I can't imagine, you know, like I've gotten a few pieces that are, I get it. I'm like, oh, this doesn't look quite the same, but I love it anyway. So, and then sometimes I go out on my deck to take pictures.
Yeah, and I've been throwing some stuff up on the screen here. because it looks like you've got some that you've taken out into natural light to get pictures of. And
lighting makes such a huge difference. It really, there are
Yeah.
some pours that are just like, look really good under certain lights, and you take them out and you shine them, like the near clear pump kit that, or demonic kit from Hodgepodge Entourage. Like once the sun comes behind it, it just looked absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. Now, which one is this?
That's the Hodgepodge Entourage Scylla. And that is a really popular model, and because it's sculpture, it's absolutely gorgeous, and it's also a lot of people write, it feels amazing as well. It's just really different and unique, and that's a large. That one is kind of tucked up here, but I have a mini. Hold on a second.
Sure.
Actually, I have even better. I have a teeny. That you can
so
see.
cute.
So it is so cute. It's so pretty. I love this colorway. So yes. So that is a Scylla, and the large is really, actually, hold on.
Yeah.
I'll get it.
And I will remind everybody while Ishtar is doing that, we've got Kristen from Pleasure Forge. And if you can't see it on the screen, but that black mug that Ishtar has been drinking from and repping is from Pleasure Forge. So we've got Kristen from Pleasure Forge who's going to be joining us next Sunday. That's right, isn't it? It is next Sunday. I hope I haven't messed that up. I tried to. Yeah, August 28th is. Okay, there it is.
For reference, I'm 5'1".
Okay.
So like this is the large.
Gotcha. Now,
And this is in a soft.
There are various ways of adding to your collection. We talked about drops, we talked about flops, but there's also the secondary market.
Absolutely. And it's funny, some of the ones you've shown I don't own anymore because I have sold them. So and some people get really squicked out by that, and that's totally fair. You can have those feelings, and some people are totally fine because silicone, you can sterilize it or sanitize it. I know that Tiberius has talked a little bit about the difference between sanitizing and sterilizing. But you can sanitize it. You can boil things for 10 minutes in a good rolling boil and sanitize it, and then or you can also soak it in a 1 to 10 bleach solution. So it's 1 part bleach to 10 parts water, and then scale up to however big your container, however much you need to soak. And both of those will clean things, and then just time as well. If it sits for a while, anything that has been possibly alive on it is going to die because it needs a warm, moist culture to thrive in. And if you're depriving it of that, it's going to die off. But even just with a good soap and water, some people are very scent sensitive. So, if you use a fragrance-free or unscented, just soap, and soap and water, just like your hands, it'll wash any of the germs off. And for some people, and then, if you sell it to someone, then you have to say, this has been, to disclose everything.
Sure.
Say that comes from a fragrance heavy or a low fragrance home, and cigarette smells and other perfumes tend to really stick to silicone a lot. So, people should disclose that. If it has any marks on the bottom, like nail marks, you need to be upfront about that.
Okay.
And then, people will sell on Twitter, Discord, Reddit has a couple subreddits for buying and selling. Because I know I've got quite a few from the secondhand market, and I've sold quite a few on the secondhand market. Some people will sell them new in bag, or they'll take them out of the bag and decide that they don't like them, or they don't end up using them. And so, pricing can be wildly different. Like some people just want to get rid of it, so they'll price it accordingly. And other people will want to hold on tight because silicone is expensive, and between that and shipping, so they'll price it accordingly. And so, sometimes people will try and lowball you, right? So you have to be, so whether or not you want to sell to that person, or if you want to do a trade with them, or, you're looking for a particular model, right? So, so there is that back and forth.
Yeah, a Super Awesome C had a comment in the chat coming from somebody with an undergrad degree in immunology. Time doesn't necessarily kill everything, as some viruses are capable of surviving in dry condition for years. Yeah, some of the things about silicone are that you can boil it. There is a little bit of concern there in boiling them, in that if you do it for too long, you can cause the silicone to get hard.
Right, especially with soft silicone. And I know with some of my glow in the dark stuff, I don't boil it, or the UV. And I know the near clear is also very sensitive to boiling. So that I'll do in a 1 to 10 bleach solution.
Right. And also, silicone is naturally hydrophobic. It actually repels water. So that helps make it a less hospitable environment for the wee beasties, as I call them. The bacteria, mold, viruses, and yeasts and things like that. But yeah, you can boil it. You can actually even throw it in the oven.
That's right, especially for really smelly stuff.
Yeah. Silicone's not going to burn until it gets up into like 600 or 700 degrees, something like that. I think it's safe up to about 450-ish or something. But
yeah,
again,
it's kind of like a cake. You put it in at like 350 for an hour.
But again, any kind of heat can cause silicones to get harder than they started out. And some of them are more prone to that. The near clear is really prone to it. The very soft silicones are very prone to it. So those are the things that you have to consider. And even when I'm putting, you talked about fragrances and things like that. Whenever I'm packaging up all of our stuff, number one, we wash everything in isopropyl alcohol. And so that way there's not any chance of us using a soap that has any kind of fragrance in it or anything else. We try to keep all of that kind of stuff as sanitary and as clean as we possibly can, and still accommodate all those folks who do have those sensitivities. Now, have you ever had any bad experiences on the secondary market?
Other than people, I've been very lucky, knock on wood, that I have had mostly good interactions, and kind of the thing, like if you put it out there, then you get it back. But at the same time, there are people who will just ghost, like I've sent out invoices and then never heard from that person again. In that case, just like, all right, I guess they decided not to and didn't communicate. Or you have people who are totally lowballing. Like if you try and sell something for, $85, they're like, oh, will you take 40 for it? I'm like, oh, I'm not there yet. And then sometimes you can haggle and meet them in the middle, or, sometimes I'll offer free shipping. And I'm notorious for sending out like mini care packages, just because it's a nice little thing to do, little freebies.
Death Moon was asking about the Eka UV, and if that was a drop or if that was a custom. And I'm
which one? This one was a drop, and this is all like neon. So this wasn't an Aurora drop or anything wild. This was just a regular drop. And this one was also a drop a few months ago. And I'll get to for those who don't know, I know a lot of people who are on probably know as much or maybe more than me. And then this is called Kiss from a Rose. And this was originally a Rogue Valentine's 2021. And it's really different. It's got like a shimmery pink and a translucent pink, and then a pale pink, and this is UV.
Okay.
And then so it started out as a Rogue, and then so many people liked it. This one I got secondhand, but I do have a couple others that I bought in that drop, or since then. That one is this neon Play-Doh friend.
Gotcha.
That's this one.
Because I'm not sure which one they were talking about because I missed it. George just threw it into my notes here for me.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not exactly sure which one they were talking about.
Sure.
But, yeah, I think
this one the Play-Doh one tends to get a lot of love because it's just really, it's different. I'm not a fan of yellow, so whenever I have like a toy with yellow in it, it has to be something that I really love. That's just that's a me thing. Like the Pride Parfait, or if I get it as a freebie, like this Velvet Alley Legacy that's up here. That's just so cool. When this little demon kid is a hodgepodge, and that glows in the dark. Both of them glow in the dark. It's like, as soon as the lights go off, they're like, boom! It's so fun.
So, now,
storage.
You have so many. We have to talk about storage and how do you do that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I started with a drawer and I started with a basket under the bed. And now, so that's an IKEA unit that had my sweaters in it. So like in the picture before, the little wood disc, the cedar discs, those are for like keeping the bugs out.
Yeah.
Because I have my sweaters in it for a long time. So like a lot of my dildos have replaced my clothes, and I've been getting rid of more clothes to make room for the toys. So that actually is a great unit. I line it because it has that really funky polyester, and I don't want it to make imprints in some of my softer toys especially. So I line it with a sheet. But that's about 8 inches tall. And the top kind of expands, so it's not a hard unit, so I can put a lot of stuff in there. That's a large taco in there that you can see right on top, and the large Orochi in the unicorn cake color, in the purple and the light blue and the pink, and a large hydrochroma in the near clear that is really big in the Vampire's Library.
Okay.
And so now, it can fit a lot.
You kind of have just tossed them in here, it looks like. I mean, there may be a little bit of organizing here, but you're not keeping them separated.
No.
Do you have any problems with the silicone? Because there's a little bit of a myth out there about how, you can't store your silicone toys together because they'll melt.
Yeah, no, that's not true. If they're all platinum cured silicone, you can just throw them in together willy-nilly. And I know that some people will put them just in raw plastic storage tubs as well. I think there are some Shop Dad, I think, went into this in a Twitter thread somewhere, where he broke down like all the different types of plastic and which ones are good. Those are IKEA, Samla. Those are like the tall, small, narrow ones, and like the 21 quart. And those are the bigger ones, the 24 or 48. And those go right under my bed. And then, so like a lot also too, people talk about physical storage of the toys themselves, but like not so much about how they organize all the other stuff that comes in, like the bags and the stickers and the receipts. So like I have that organizer for the bags and stickers as well. I know some people will put their stickers in like sheets. I just kind of put mine in plastic baggies. And then I have a separate binder for the receipts, because as I've sold them, I also have to pull out like that I sold, which ones I sold and how much I sold it for, because a lot of people are starting to they want to move away. I live in Massachusetts, so for me, AKA Taxachusetts. So, so I've always had that $600 profit threshold. That if I profit off of what I sell, then I have to pay taxes on it.
Gotcha.
But like, so there's that myth. Like, so a lot of people are doing like friends and family or Cash App. because they don't want to have to pay taxes if they sell more than $600 worth of toys. But really it's that if they make a profit of over $600. So if you buy a toy for like $75 and you sell it for 70 or 65, you're not making a profit on that. You're losing money.
Yeah.
And especially, so that's why it's such a bummer when people try and lowball you. It's like, don't they know that like PayPal takes some money off? They have to pay to have it shipped. And then, because you're paying for shipping, you know, to you, that's kind of like and then if you decide you lose out on that money.
Yeah. It's almost like you have a little business going on there. You're starting to understand our side of it.
Yeah. I mean, you have to put yourself. Yeah, it is. You do. I do have that sympathy, or empathy, I should say, because I do. It's like, you know, like that back and forth. You're like, well, no, it's because you don't, you know, unless you like absolutely need to get rid of it. And that is, I understand those circumstances and I get it. Like, you just need to, you're moving and it just needs to go, or like you're ready to move on from the hobby. In which case that makes so much sense.
Right. Now, we kind of busted a myth there on storing them. You have no problems storing them together. I have a flop bucket. I've told this story many times, but I have my bucket of flops, and there's stuff that's been in there for 4 or 5 years, crushed down at the bottom, and I can pull them out, and they are just as I put them in there 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have my
or
own
they'll bounce back. They'll just sit there, like after a while, like, oh, I guess I had this like jammed in the wrong corner, and now it looks like it's been jammed in the corner, but you leave it out and it will kind of settle back into itself.
Mm-hmm. Now, the other, I kind of want to get into a little bit about the care and feeding of them, so to speak, because, you know, we've got the storage. And what about lubes? Have you had any problems with any kind of particular lubricants or anything like that?
No, not on the toys themselves, because I either will use water-based or oil. Like I still have a stash of the Butters lube that I have to kind of work through, and that's oil-based. And for a while I was also using just plain old coconut oil. And so I don't use any hybrid lubes. I don't use silicone lubes, because silicone and silicone are not friends as far as like the lube goes. Mm-hmm. You know, unless I know some toy reviewers and some people are like, well, if you wash it right away, it'll be fine. And I don't use condoms on my toys either, because that's a whole other discussion as well. And I know some people do. And there is that concern of like whatever lube is on the inside, and not every condom maker will tell.
Is that almost nobody in the condom makers discloses this, but the lube that's on the 99% of the condoms out there is silicone based, and unless it specifically says that it's water based, I think Trojan Magnums use a water based lube, but unless they tell you otherwise, I can almost guarantee you that it's a silicone lube in there. And my experience with silicone lubes and toys has been that the toy will not disintegrate. It's not going to just fall apart from being exposed to silicone lube. Lily O'Reilly did a video. She had some pieces that she stuffed into a jar, packed it in there with silicone lube, and it just melted. Pulled it out about 6 months later, and they didn't melt. What they did is they absorbed a lot of that silicone. Oh,
that's right. I'm thinking of a different.
You're thinking of that she did. Dangerous Lily. Dangerous Lily had her jar of toxic toys, basically, that they all melted together. But Lily O'Reilly did a 6 month, just left it on a shelf for 6 months, and when she pulled it out, there was some weakening in the silicone, but overall, it didn't do any damage to it. And eventually what we find, and I don't think she went into this, but what we find is that over time it tends to weep that lube back out. So it's not going to melt the toy, but you're probably going to have a little bit more work cleaning it up, and you'll probably have to deal with it leaking that lube out over time.
The Suba, yeah. I have had other toys like Doc Johnson toys actually melt into each other, and I didn't know why that happened until much later. I have my Discord open, and I just saw a couple questions, and so like for me, using coconut oil as a lube, I didn't have any problems with it, and I didn't get any yeast infections as a result of it. And my body likes I don't use it very often for one thing, but then I also use a lot of oil-based lubes. I had a lot of problems actually personally myself with water-based lubes that I got like more yeast infections, and I became more sensitive to it. So I'm a vaginal user. And so I think for anal, that's like a whole different thing that I'm not quite sure about, so I can't speak to it. Right. But for me, coconut oil was fine. Oil-based lubes were better for me than water-based lubes.
You mentioned problems with water-based lubes, and I haven't told anybody this yet, but I have Failofile booked for October, sometime in October, and she just did a huge write-up on lubes, water-based lubes, and even going into the osmolality of it and the pH of it, and comparing all these different lubes, and from there you can start to make choices based off of now what the pH is of this particular lube, and you can start to figure out what works for your body and what doesn't.
Oh, I saw that she had written that up, and I hadn't read it to absorb it. It was a lot to absorb.
Oh yeah, I mean it was huge, but
it's awesome.
I saw that and I immediately sent her a direct message, and I was like, I've got to have you on. You've got to come on, and we've got to talk about this. So I've got her booked in October, but I'll have more details on that as we get closer.
Woo!
Yeah, and I have talked to different people, and I've talked to different doctors and people in the medical profession, and they have differing opinions about, I don't want to say food oils, but like coconut oil and things like that, and whether or not that's safe for use. And it generally comes down to how does your body react to it.
Yeah. And you don't know, and unless you're in a pinch, and like, well, let me see if this olive oil will work.
Yeah. So as we're kind of talking about some of these things, I don't want to say myths. We're myth busting here, but I kind of want to talk about the care. We've talked about the storage, and then we need to talk about. My note here says fallout and degradation, and where I'm kind of headed with that is wear and tear and exposure to UV light and exposure to sunlight and things like that. Have you seen any issues in your collection when you've had to, or when those things have happened?
Sure. I've only been collecting for 2 years. So as far as long term, I'm really not there yet, because like the glow in the dark stuff that's out all the time, that does get light, that does light up. I'll give it a wash every once in a while, but I haven't noticed the lights dimming on certain pieces. And, I keep my nails fairly short as well. So as far as any kind of nail marks that are on the bottom, I haven't seen any of that kind of stuff. Now, when I'm cleaning things, I am sensitive. I do recognize that, softs, glow in the dark, UVs. I don't boil them. I'll do them, soap and water, and I won't use scented soap. And I do use a dish soap. I know a lot of people like the Blue Dawn, but I just find like an unscented version of whatever all natural dish stuff. Because you have to read the ingredients. And if they don't have the ingredients, you don't know what's on there. So then you move, over to a brand that does list the ingredients.
Right.
Because there might be some cones in there.
Boiling, I forgot to mention, you kind of touched on it here. Glow in the dark and UV pigments tend to be a little bit more sensitive to heat. And so try not to boil your glow in the dark and UV toys.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, do you have any Holy Grail pieces that you're on the hunt for?
So the June in 2020, they had a bunch of what's now called pink ribbon, and I fell in love with that type of pour from Bad Dragon, and so I had been on the hunt for 2 years, looking for a quote unquote real pink ribbon, because I had a couple other pieces that were very similar. But not quite. So and people are really funny about ribbons and auroras, right? So like for it to be an aurora, it has to be a named aurora. It has to say, it has to have like all the colors in it, and it has to have a certain amount of translucent. And I'm not that picky. But for me, to look for a pink ribbon, I wanted a lot of the translucent, and I wanted a lot of the pink, and I wanted a lot of the purple. And I've seen some that have a lot of blue in it, and those are just like, oh, those are so cool. Yeah. But I've only seen a handful of those. So I had a couple friends say, hey, there's this piece in inventory, you should go check it out. And that's this Tucker. And so this one has some silver on it, so it's a little bit different.
Okay.
And then I found another piece, and this was just recently. And this one is a Chance, and this one has, I don't know if you can see it, but it has a lot of white on the top here. And it almost looks like a drip, but it has that kind of banding. I'm a sucker for a really good spiral.
Okay.
A spiral marble. Like that is like one of the things that I love. Or like really thin feathers that look like something from like an Art Deco, like a book, like end papers, right? Or wallpaper, with that feathering. That's the stuff that I love.
Yeah.
And then secondhand, someone was selling this demo on Twitter, and so I messaged her right away, and I was like, "That's it." So this pour style was my unicorn for a while. So it has the translucent. You can't really see it because my ring light is too powerful, but and it has a little bit of the purple, and there is down at the bottom some red and yellow. To make it that kind of that pink rainbow ribbon.
So do you have a particular goal as you're collecting?
No, I don't. I have a finance, I have my budget that I set, right? And so when I know that drops are coming, like I was planning for the Strange Bedfellas anniversary drop because I knew it was coming.
Okay.
So, I didn't spend money in or I only spent X amount of money in the, in other drops. And so I do that kind of planning. And then some makers are starting to release their certain molds on a seasonal, or they'll have seasonal specific models. So I'll be like, all right, so, and Halloween's coming. So I have to prepare for that. I have to budget for that.
So do you have you mentioned a budget, but how often do you add to your collection?
So it really kind of depends. I've been pretty good this week. I only got one thing in the Strange Bedfellas drop. And then I got one thing in the Fantasy Grove drop because I love witches and the Morrigan and Celtic mythology. And Tibbs is amazing, and he did the hand painted bottoms with the raven or the crow on the bottom, and so like this has a little bit of the near clear, and it has the purple and the silver, and it has the swirl, and I was like, "Yep, that's for me."
Now, speaking of that base painting, the hand painting on the base there, number one, Tibbs did one this week I've seen some pictures of it, and it's amazing. But we also have Kizu and Friends.
Yes.
We had to rebook them. There was a weather emergency, and they do some incredible base art.
I actually won Footsie Rolls on Twitter. I won their raffle or their giveaway, and so I'm getting a Kizu and Friends toy with the hand painting on the bottom, and and it has the star of Inanna, or the star of Ishtar,
wow.
that they did for me on that toy. So I'm super excited to get that whenever it arrives. They just posted it on Twitter like a couple days ago, and I was like,
Okay.
there it is.
Now, I kind of interrupted you there. We were talking
not
about
at
how
all.
often you add to your collection.
So I was a little spendy in June. And so, it really kind of depends. And I have to slow down. But it could be, I bought like 10 in a week, and then like I'll buy 2 in a week, or I'll go a couple weeks without buying anything. So it's really, all over the place, but it's also, depending on my budget and what actually drops. And my collection is probably about, it's not quite 50-50 Bad Dragon and indies, but I have a little more indies now than I have Bad Dragon. But because that's where I started, was Bad Dragon, and they have so many. They drop almost every weekday, and it's for someone who doesn't have any self-control, you can get into a lot of trouble. Or you can really build your collection super fast, but then you're paying, $15 for shipping, at least, depending on where you are. So, the shipping costs tend to add up. So like, after a while, you're like, I can't do that anymore. Or like, I'll buy 2 because then the shipping will be, could, it's, or like, oh, I'll get a flop and I'll get this one, and I'll get some pins and some stickers, and like, all right. And I'll get something for my friend. And so
how do you find the new makers?
Twitter mostly. When I was first starting out, a lot of it was Lily O'Reilly, and then Reddit. Few Honeydew has an amazing master list of makers. And I also want to give a shout out to House Gecko. They have a really great guide to firmnesses and for noobs and for, experts alike. That's also really fantastic. But yeah, Twitter is a really big one. I know there's a lot of stuff that goes on with different people, but and then I'm in Discord, I'm on Reddit. So at some like, I feel like Reddit is certain communities are more dedicated for just showing off toys. There's the main Bad Dragon subreddit, and a lot goes on there. And then there's a buy sell trade, a BST subreddit as well. And then Dragon War still exists, and that's also really good. Some people, Dragon War and Dragon Horde, which is the way to kind of, it's like that sideways. Like, some people will only shop on there, or like you'll get right now. People who are selling secondhand aren't having a lot of luck because everyone's kind of in the same boat. And I feel like it's just the market right now. The secondhand market is also really flooded. People who are like, I'm seeing toys that are like, oh, I really wanted that. I dropped like 4 months ago. And then you see it pop up. So in some ways it's kind of great because it gives you a second chance at some of the toys that you may have thought, oh, we're gone into which is so nice about like being part of the collecting community and seeing the toy, like being happy for somebody when then they get a toy that you are after, that you can say like, oh, like at least I'll get to see it instead of like having, and I'll get to see like all the cool UV and glow in the dark pictures. And whereas it goes to someone who's reselling it on eBay. So frustrating.
So Death Moon asks, do you have a top 5 in your collection?
Ooh. Yes, I do. I don't know if I can limit it to 5, but yes, I do have. I have some tops, some top friends. One of them is one of my first. It's this Merfolk, which.
Okay.
Oh, that's all right. So that should look familiar to some people. That's my PFP. That's my profile pick in a bunch of places. So this is a Merfolk. Merfolk is one of my all-time favorite models, and this one was the first one. It's a small and a soft, and it's like, that's just a great one. Batao is another. and that's Strange Bedfellas. And this one's a super soft, and SPF super soft is so dreamy.
Oh, wow.
It's so squishy. It's so squishy.
I think you had a video of the squish on that. Was it?
Yeah.
I'll have to see if I can find where that went. But
yeah, that's
no,
all
keep
right.
going.
If someone really wants it, I can post it on Twitter. I'm happy to do that. And then Clayton is another one. PPS Nariad is another. I do like my tentacles. And Moz as well. Odin is a favorite,
Okay.
which is Strange Bedfellas as well. And I'm trying to think who else. There's a Eckle. Kudu Voodoo's Eckle is another slept on model that is just really, I like Swells. TTC's Cortez is another one that I really like. That's more than 5 and I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned Swells. And that was something else that was mentioned last week, was that preference for swells versus a knot.
Yeah.
And I think Venus is in the chat, and last week she said she's going to have to do more swells.
This is one of my Cielas. And this is a void opal adjacent, which is a really popular colorway and just really gorgeous.
So when it comes to new designs, are there any particular makers that you gravitate to? You're always excited to see what they come out with?
As far as designers, or like, because I know Venus and Frost are like on a roll right now, as far as their designs being purchased. But like, who else? They're kind of like the really big ones right now. I can't think of anyone else off the top of my head.
Or any other makers?
Kudu Voodoo is doing some really neat stuff with Packers, which is not really my thing, but I think it's exciting. And grinders are another thing that are really hot right now.
Yeah, there seems to be phases. The Moz were huge for a little while there, and now we've kind of transitioned into grinders.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big tongue. I mean, that's a big grinder in and of itself.
Yeah.
There was something else I was going to say, and I can't. Like right here on my tongue. I don't know. It'll come back to me.
So, has your collection ever been discovered by accident while it was in storage?
I've left. No, I've been really lucky.
Okay.
My kids are older and they have zero interest in it.
Okay.
So like I haven't had any snoopers. I have left things in the bathroom. And I have been lucky enough to like go back and like, all right, I tucked it behind the shower, so no one found it. I have made other like money errors, like I accidentally paid for a bad dragon out of my son's bank account, and he was like, "What's this BD Enterprises? It sounds like a hardware store." And I'm like, "Oh no!"
Oh no! Oh, jeez. I'm just kind of flipping through some of the pictures here because there's so many pretties to see.
Yeah. Does anyone have any like requests? Like, I know I have a few that I like to show, and like some that I don't, really see the light of day that much. What was the one I was thinking of? Something Squishy Toys is also like someone like she's always making really cool stuff. But it was Arkham Harbor. And so they're on Etsy. I think they're building their own website, but this is a fish, and so it's got the tail, and that comes up, and it's the colors, the marbling is really fun. They're a new maker, and so she's got, I know something Squishy has a lobster design, and they're doing something similar. someone else just came out with one too. I was like, oh, that's cool. And Fire Crotch Toys also has some really, really interesting designs as well.
Okay.
Can I see your auroras?
Yeah, we've had a few people in the chat who've asked for things. They want to see the auroras, Bubba, and
which I just showed you.
Okay, and
that's Bubba.
Any of your rares?
So I have. So this is a rogue aurora. So this isn't a named one, but it has, because it doesn't have much of the blue, I think.
Okay.
So this is a Bad Dragon Demon deck, and some of my other rares. There, I have 2 Mystics. This one I just got, and it's like a tie-dye. It's super duper. And it's like wicked muddy on one side, but when I show it under, where did my flashlight go?
Yeah, Arkham Harbor is one that I have my eye on. They do some really interesting stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know how this is looking on the screen, but then, so this one has some cool stuff on it. If I can't see it. I haven't posted this one very much on Twitter yet. I have on Discord and not on Reddit. What else? This one's also a newer Mystic. It's covered in cat hair, sorry. And this one glows in the dark, but it also has a purple and a pink. It's almost like it's like a black pink ribbon.
Okay.
And now you can't see it. It looks really muddy. But this one's super cool. The pink one, I have a bunch of black nebula from from Bad Dragon. And what else is rare? I'm going to pull this one out. It's a Goblin Dildo Emporium.
Oh, yeah.
Tentacle. And the Goblin Dildo is almost like a cautionary tale, because at the start of the pandemic, unfortunately, the owner's mother passed away, and I think she really helped them. And then when everyone went purchase crazy during the pandemic, they really floundered and got overwhelmed and eventually shut down. And this I placed in April, and I didn't get it until September, and it's actually, looking back now, it's a miracle I got it at all. So I have one from a closed shop. I don't have any damn average. What else? Background? I don't know. So yeah, I have a bunch of stuff that's fun and neat, and happy to show it off. But.
So if somebody was starting to develop a collection, what advice would you give them?
Oh my gosh. I would say, someone was just starting out, advice I wish I had was, watch the Lily O'Reilly reviews, Dangerous Lily. There's so much in use on the Bad Dragon Reddit, but there's a lot of information on there as well. And that I would almost say Twitter might be better to a certain extent, but until you know a couple of the really big collectors, they're kind of hard to find. At least for me, I would not have found this otherwise if I hadn't read the After the Yes blog. So big shout out to them, which has since been taken down. So if you are into Reddit, I would say get on the Bad Dragon subreddit, or try and find a couple people on Discord or on Twitter, or even just follow a couple makers, and from there you can kind of jump into the loop, get into the loop that way.
Yeah, I think that I'm on a few of the different Discords, and there is a lot of knowledge there, and I don't want to. One of the things I like about it is that often things are segregated to the sense that there's the safe for work stuff, and then there's the not safe for work stuff. And if you don't want to be bombarded with in-use pictures and things, you can definitely avoid them that way, which is a little bit harder on Reddit.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. And even on at least a couple of Discords that I'm on, there's not a lot of in use. There's no like real pictures or videos or any of that kind of stuff. There's some descriptions. But it is nice that you can, there are threads that you can just kind of read and you can have it open as you're in the grocery line.
Yeah.
And not worry about someone like creeping over your shoulder.
Yeah. I'm going to put it out there one last time for folks. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat. I've got one or two more questions that I want to throw to Ishtar, and then we'll be wrapping it up. Now, what have you learned as being a collector? What have you learned from this whole experience?
So I've actually learned more about what shapes I enjoy as a user, but I've also I have a lot that I haven't used, and I know there are mixed feelings about people with people like, oh no, if you have it, you should use it. But I don't feel that way. To me, that's functional art. Like to see the different pour styles and like the different designs that all the different makers come up with. It really is sculpture. It really is artwork to me. So, for me, learning about that and also being part of the community has taught me a lot about people and has helped me, interact with others in a way that it would have, I think, taken me a little bit longer to get there had I not been involved with the community, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Granted, being kind to everybody, but like just being sensitive about people's pronouns in a way, or like, finding out about what different people feel about different things. Like, would have taken me a little longer I would have figured it out eventually, but it just got me there faster. Just the investment in my future. So if I stopped collecting, this month, I would still have quite a lot to to tide me over, right? I have actually more than enough. But I still have stuff in bags. So like, it would feel like a new toy, just taking it out of the bag. Mm-hmm.
I think that Twitter is a great place to get started. I think that I hesitate to recommend Etsy because there's so many bad options on there. And that are just either not safe, or there's the whole idea of they're stolen designs. Yeah. And so between that's just a deadly combination of a stolen design made out of PVC jelly. It's like that's a recipe for disaster. It's been surprising to me how much IP theft is going on. And even if it's not a direct recast of somebody else's design, there are some that are so inspired by another design. You can hold them next to each other and you might have a hard time telling who made which.
Yeah, absolutely.
August asks, are there any changes you hope to see in the future for either the fantasy or indie world or the sex toy industry as a whole? Good question.
That is a great question. I think that education is a really big part of it. Like if I had known, and granted I'm a little older, and I feel like younger people now have the opportunity to have so much better information right out of the gate if they're able to get it, and that's a big part too. So they're not going in dispensers and buying a jelly dildo out of there, or if they do, they know that they should only use it like once or twice and then throw it away, like that. Right. Like not to hold on to it, which everyone has different things, but that there are so many shapes available for different bodies and different identities, which I think is also a really cool thing. Maybe the fantasification, if that's a word I maybe just made up, of the generic sex toys, so that it's not just all humanoid. It's you get these different really cool, neat shapes with different textures, and in different firmnesses. Right? I don't have my glasses on, so I'm just like kind of loosely scanning the questions, but like firmness does make a big difference. Like I like the rock hard cheapo dildo I had from 2005 was super firm, and like no wonder I didn't like it. So until I discovered like soft and super soft, like, and how much better that works with different shapes, like I would not have known that if I hadn't discovered this whole fantasy side. And I know that certain makers like Uberime do have more humanistic and different in like the dual density and the triple density, and that is also really cool that most people probably wouldn't know about.
Yeah. Death Moon asks, from a collector's point of view, do you wish more indie makers offered customs or guided customs?
Ooh. So I know I've seen like, just the last couple of years and the influx of people who want, who want customs and how hard that is on indie makers. I love what SBF is doing with friend requests, so that you can get a certain pour style in a certain toy type in a different size and firmness. Like, I think that's a really cool way of doing it. The seasonal model that Pleasure Forge is doing, Tibbs's occasional, playing around with semi-customs. What PPS did is they took requests and that people could get customs, but then they batch poured a whole bunch of them. So that, and then sold those extras, so that, and I know some people are like, no, this is my custom, like this is based on my character or my fandom, and I don't want anyone else to have it, which I think is, definitely valid. But I also love the idea of sharing that, like, oh, instead of, so it's always polite to ask. So if you're not sure if someone's colors or, designs that they pick, like, always ask. Because, they might have just such a really strong belief that, or they, it's something that's theirs. Whereas, like, I love being pour mates with some of my friends or people that I know or people in the community. Like, I think that's just really, really fun. That, like, hey, you got like the same batch that I did, and, and we match, like, oh, that's so cute. That's so fun. I like that. So yeah. I'm not that, and if, people will ask me like, oh, hey, that's a really cool recipe. I'm like, yeah, use it. Like, neon blue, neon pink, and diamond, like they look really cool together. Go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be nice, but at the same time, like, that time has come. There's too many people in the community who want like really specific things. I think that it does put a big strain, but I like the made to order. Like, I like the idea that, like, everyone's, like, hey, we're offering the cotton candy seasonal pour, and you can get something in that. I like that kind of modified, low risk customs.
Yeah.
MTO. So yes. So yeah. That's my long-winded answer.
Okay. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to make sure we got to talk about? Because we kind of ran all over the place. We had a structure in the beginning, and then we kind of just went squirrel with all of it.
It became very organic, which I like. I definitely feel like we had fun. I had, some really interesting, I see some good, really cool things. I would just say, if you have a budget, stick to it, because you could really go off the rails very quickly. And that's one thing that I would say. This is like one last little, couple last little things. Was that one thing that I didn't want to really talk about was the financial side of it, because I've put a lot of money into my collection, and it's weird when people will count things and kind of do the loose math.
Yeah.
Like, wow, your collection is this much money, and like, that's a lot, but I don't really collect things, so I don't understand it. I'm like, well, then stop. Like, then don't, that bubble thought should not have come out there. Thank you very much. Yeah. So I don't really talk, because, someone can do the loose math of just even the stuff that's behind me, but that might not be at what I actually paid for it.
Right.
Based on the secondhand market, and, it doesn't look like a flop, but it really is. And, maybe
a trade where you did a 2-for-1, or.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So. But there's so much, there are always going to be new and interesting things. And that's one thing that I really admire is the creativity of that's coming out. That's just seems to be all over the place, is like coming out with new models, coming out with new styles. That's why I don't get so sad when I miss out on certain pores anymore. That I always know that there will be something else really cool coming down the pike at some point.
Right. Well, Ishtar, thank you so much. I appreciate spending time with me this evening. Who was that? Consider insurance for if your collection gets bigger. Yeah, definitely think about insurance if that's something that if your collection is substantial enough. Which you can just throw that underneath your homeowner's policy, so it's not like you have to go and get dildo insurance.
No, that would be hilarious if that
right.
existed. Or your renter's insurance, because I have to, this just the fact that I'm an older collector too. So I mean, there are so many people who are like under 25. It just it's kind of weird, but at the same time, it's also really cool.
Yeah. Well, Ishtar, again, thank you so much. We will have to do this again sometime. We'll get a catch up on how your collection evolves over time or something like that.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right. Say goodnight, and I will do my wrap up, and I'll come back to you in just a minute.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. So, wonderful conversation with Ishtar 137, a dildo collector and somebody who has an incredible collection, something that is something to be envied. I will remind everybody, we have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/Amavidi, and Fiona has decided to drop in here at the last moment. We also have, who do we have coming up? We've got Pleasure Forge next Sunday, August 28th. That's going to be Kristen. We've had Shop Dad on a couple times. Now we're going to get the other side of the conversation. We're going to talk to Kristen and get the real story. Then we've got Bat, who is a designer, on September 4th. Venus, another designer, on September 11th. Monster Fergus is coming up on September 18th. And with that, I am done. And we'll do it again next week. Bye.